Let's be real, the internet wasn't built for how we work today, and enterprise networking shows it. VPNs, firewalls, and SD-WANs were designed for a different era, clunky, manual, and full of friction. In this episode of Great Things with Great Tech, we meet Adam Ierymenko, the creator and founder of ZeroTier, and Andrew Gault, its recently appointed CEO. ZeroTier is rewriting the rules of global networking, one line of code at a time. Born from open source roots and now powering millions of devices across the world, ZeroTier blends the power of SD-WAN, VPN, and SDN into one elegant peer-to-peer platform. No hardware, no hassles, just seamless, secure connectivity. From cloud to edge, office to anywhere, ZeroTier is here to connect all the world's devices. This is episode 100 of Great Things with Great Tech with ZeroTier. Adam, Andrew, welcome to episode 100 of Great Things with Great Tech. Some say I'd never make it, but here we are at episode 100. So it's crazy to think that I started this 5 years ago in the pandemic and we're on episode 100. But thank you very much for ZeroTier being on as episode guest 100. And it's a bit of a special one today. I don't often do a dual interview role, but I figured, you know, where you guys are, what you guys are doing, it's worthwhile, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us. Excited.
Thank you for having us.
Excellent. So ZeroTier. So Adam, we're going to start with you. You're the founder of ZeroTier back in around 2011. Give a bit of a background about yourself, how you came to be in this crazy world of IT and networking, and why you saw a need to create something different in the networking world with ZeroTier.
Okay. So my name's Adam. I'm one of those people that started programming when I was like 6 or 7 on a Commodore 64, you know, back in that era. So
yes.
I have been doing this for, if you count that, a very long time. And I have a pretty varied background. I went to school at University of Cincinnati. I've worked in everything from startups to computer vision to GPUs to InfoSec for the U.S. government. And actually, that's when I started working on this as a moonlight project. I'll get back around to that. Wow. So anyway, having been into it for a long, long time, I was on the internet very early. I first got online, not counting teenage hacker stuff, through the first ISP in Cincinnati called Internet Access Cincinnati. I was still in high school at the time.
Yeah.
And you get online back then, and the way the internet worked back then was every device, of course, back then a device was a gray big box sitting under a desk or in a server room somewhere, had an IP address, and it just had an IP address. And if I want to send you a file, you would give me your IP address and I would just send it to you. And that's it. Everything could just talk. Everything could communicate. It was one big sort of flat world. And on one hand, as the internet went public, that ran into all kinds of problems around security and, of course, IPv4 not having enough addresses, having to put NAT in the way still. And then we added, I'm time compressing quite a bit here.
Very much.
And then we added, mobility and mobile devices and cloud. And now essentially every device is in a way a mobile device because it can either be physically moved or it can be virtually moved. So anyway, jumping back to then, I remember the internet that way, and it was very, very simple to get simple things done, move data around, collaborate. And I watched it grow into the internet that it is today. Some things got better, some things got worse, of course. One of the things that got worse is as we added NAT and firewalls and mobility and everything else, simple things got really hard. And that has had a couple of consequences. First of all, it's a gigantic time sink. I wonder sometimes if NAT is like one of those $1 trillion mistakes in the history of software engineering, in the sense that if you added up all of the workarounds that we have to do for it, it probably is at least many, many, many billions. Um, and at the same time, that also drove something else I'm very interested in is privacy and autonomy online and that kind of thing. So that gets into the open source roots. When you talk about this starting in 2011, the company didn't start in 2011. The project did. Or at least the ancestral roots of the project. So one of the things that's driven, I mean, there's lots of things that have, but one of the things that's driven the centralization of everything into these kind of closed silos is also the fact that it's so difficult to connect now. I can't just send you a file. Not easily, not without running some special piece of software. I have to use some kind of third-party service because there's a bunch of stuff in the way, and because you're mobile and I don't know where you are. Jumping forward a little bit, I had ideas all through my career about how we might be able to do networking better. I was really interested in peer-to-peer networking. Of course, I got very into cryptography and information security. And I did a lot of reading on the subject, and I was paying attention to things like cryptographically addressed networks and peer-to-peer networks that auto-configure and, things like this. And, I had a lot of ideas just kind of cooking in the back. In 2011, I actually wrote the first design document for an ancestor of what would become ZeroTier, where I started playing with the idea of using cryptographically addressed cryptographic addresses for networking.
Okay.
And a cryptographic address, just for the not super nerdy people in the audience, it's an address where your key is your address. So you have a key that says who you are, and that key is also, quote, where you are on the network. I had all these ideas. I didn't do a ton with them. I did some playing around. I did some prototyping. And then I actually got a new job. I got a job doing information security for US government. It's kind of funny because before this job, I had worked for a bunch of startups, and I love working for startups, obviously. I did one myself. But I also had the experience of coming into the office on Monday and them saying, sorry, we can't pay you your last paycheck, but you can raid the office and steal all the hardware you want. And that actually happened to me twice in different variations. And
the pluses and minuses, right? The pluses and minuses of that world.
So as I was getting a little older, and my wife and I were talking about having a kid, I wanted to kind of get out of startups a little bit and do something more stable but still interesting. And I was interested in InfoSec, so I ended up getting hooked up with this job doing InfoSec and network engineering. When network engineering became my day job, it really became visceral to me in terms of the pain of how terrible it is. I mean, it's just absolute. I mean, it's better today, partly because things like ZeroTier exist. But back then, and we're talking about 2013 now, 2014, I watched people inside this age. I was working for NOAA, actually, the weather service, but I watched people trying to set up collaborations to collaborate with an academic institution, and they wanted to set up a network so that the supercomputer that's doing climate simulation can talk to the supercomputer or the data set at a university, and they would spend 3 weeks doing this.
Yeah.
It's just absolute horror.
Can I add something there as well? Can I add, obviously, I think the interesting part about networks being hard and struggling to understand it, it's very true. Like, we said in the pre-show, I've worked in platforms and infrastructure my whole career.
Sure.
But I was never a network dude, and I never pretended to be, right? I was dangerous enough to configure a Cisco Catalyst switch or do some network load balancing or something, but that layer beyond that was never me. And around that same time, I'm going to do a shout out to Simon Dixon from Zetagrid, because he's the one who put me onto you guys initially. He was the network engineer, and he won't mind me saying that he was probably the most grumpiest man that we had in the company, right? Like, and he won't mind me saying that. But I would be doing my thing on the infrastructure, the network, all the application layers and whatnot, and then it wouldn't work. And I'd go over to Simon just behind me. I go, Simon, is the network broken? And he's like, it's not the network. It's not the network. He was so adamant that it wasn't the network. I'm like, mate, it's the network. Like everything is good here. So to your point, it's just been a constant struggle forever between, the different silos of IT to make networking as simple as possible and for everything to work together as simple as that, right? So I thought I'd jump in there as well and mention that because what you hit on was absolutely how it is.
There's a reason he was the grumpiest guy. It's because he was working with conventional networking.
He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me now. He's going to kill me.
That'll make you. No, it's fine. That'll make you grumpy. So going back to this time, so I also in the course of this job was doing work with a lot of like enterprisey network stuff. So I was dealing with software-defined networks, SDN, big smart switches that you can create like millions of VLANs on them, and all that kind of stuff.
It was a time for it. Yeah, it was just coming up.
Yeah, and they were using stuff like that, and it was kind of fun to play with. And I did some reading about it. I remember reading about something nobody remembers called Project Jericho out of the United Kingdom, where they talked about something. This was so ahead of its time, called deperimeterization is what they called it.
That sounds
which basically meant instead of the physical network boundary, replacing that with a virtual network boundary. Back then, if you said that, IT people would like hug their firewall, like, no, you won't take it from me. But anyway, so I read that. I read, of course, the Google Beyond Court paper, which was kind of saying similar things. And I started like thinking about this in the back of my mind. And of course, keep in mind that I had gotten this job with the largest, at that time, most stable entity you could get a job with because I had a kid coming. But, I like startups. And so I was there for 6 months and I was thinking about founding a startup. So anyway, I was just thinking about this in the back of my mind. I did a little bit of hacking, and then I had kind of a eureka moment, which was the birth of this. It was both from a technical point of view and a mission point of view. So the original mission statement of ZeroTier, and we're almost kind of coming back around to that now, is to, quote, directly connect the world's devices. What that means is anything with a network, basically treat the entire planet like one data center. And the way I should be able to do networking is I should be able to take any device anywhere on Earth and connect it to any other device on a common shared network. And I should be able to do that instantly without having to worry about it.
Yeah.
And I kind of set that, I set that as like a goal and a problem statement and also kind of a mission statement.
And
you were going to say something.
That's a huge mission statement and problem statement, right? That is probably the biggest one that you can almost ever do, right? So kudos for thinking like seriously, outside the box and try and solve something that's so fundamentally an issue in this world.
All right. So I thought about it that way. And then I also had kind of a technical moment, which is I had been interested in all this. So the peer-to-peer networking stuff, that comes from a sector of development. It's very open source heavy. I refer to them as the cryptography hippies. Like, these are the people that are like, all information should be free, man, and nobody can spy on us. Those are the kinds of people that work on those kinds of systems, mostly, at least at the time. And then I had my head in this SDN stuff for my day job at the time. And I had this moment where I realized, okay, SDN is this layer to make networks manageable that runs on top of like a smart switch in a data center, right? So what happens if you take an SDN protocol and instead of doing that, you stick it on top of a peer-to-peer network? So that's what ZeroTier is. It's a peer-to-peer network with an enterprise SDN protocol on top of it. And when you do that, what that gives you is it gives you a giant virtual smart switch the size of the Earth that you can just connect things to.
Love that.
So then I started hacking on it a lot. And fast forwarding a bit, I'm going to try to fast forward a bit in the interest of time. Fast forwarding a bit. By 2014, I actually had an early version of it working, and I stuck it on GitHub. Put it on GitHub. It had some instructions for downloading it, starting it, joining a network, all this kind of thing. Of course, it made it to the front page of Hacker News and got a lot of comments saying, "This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen." But also a few that were like, "This is totally brilliant. This is awesome. Why has no one done this?" And it was actually at that time in 2014, the company didn't even exist yet, that the growth curve started. So I started running the infrastructure just on, at that time, just cheap VPSs. It's funny, at that time, $5 VPS would host the whole network. Now, it takes like 40 gigabit network cards in, data centers and stuff to do it. But that's when I noticed number of devices online was just starting to grow, and people were starting to talk about it, and people were starting to play with it. The first things people did with it were things like playing Minecraft and playing video games and remotely accessing their dev box and things like this. Yeah. So I kept working on it, and I made a website for it. Doesn't look anywhere near as nice as our current website, and we have a new one coming. Looks much nicer. And put it out there. And I also then, at the time, there was a site that was pretty popular called AngelList. This was where you could list, basically, you could put a pitch deck up there for a company.
I think I know the one.
I don't even know if it still exists, but at the time it was
variations of it. PitchBook is around.
Variations of it. Yeah, PitchBook. I think a couple of them. But all I did was I made an account for ZeroTier on AngelList, and I put a basic description up there and a basic pitch deck, like outline of a pitch deck, and a link to the GitHub forum or the GitHub project. And within 2 weeks of doing this, I was contacted by an active angel investor that pitched me on turning this into a company. It was just me at the time. So that is how it got launched as a company in 2015. And when it was launched as a company in 2015, we knew, and I had extensive discussions with the early, turns out there ended up being 2 angel investors in the beginning. I had discussions with them about, look, we have a growth curve here. I'd already kind of confirmed that it was an exponential growth curve. It's pretty clear that there is a need here. There is pain. There are people that want this done. It's spreading kind of virally, as a product. But I kind of understood that we are ahead of our time. What I mean by that is I knew that it would take time to build this up, and it would also take time for the market to catch up and be ready for it. Yeah. So we intentionally, I can divide the history of the company into kind of, actually now almost 3 epochs. But the first couple years of the company, it was just me and 2 or 3 other people, and I ran it incredibly lean. I was living in Southern California at the time. I'm now living back in Cincinnati, Ohio. Mm-hmm. But I was working at a co-working space at the time, and I had a guy tell me, he said, I think you're going to make it. And I said, why is that? And he said, because you have the crappiest car in the parking lot of the co-working space. So I ran it very, very lean. Now, what the angel investment did enable me to make it a full-time job and still continue to raise a family, which that's important. But ran it very, very lean for the first couple of years, and just built users, built brand, got proof of concept customers, got what I referred to as minimum viable revenue. Basically, will anyone pay for this thing? And that happened for a while until this is a longer story, but I'll condense it. Raised
before that, can I just say as well? I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing here is that the product was there, it was ready. You said it was ahead of its time, and the build up is so important here. But the key part is that you don't give up, because you can tell and just the way that you're describing the background, the history, and the purpose, that you are so dedicated to what this is trying to solve, right? So there's real passion in this product, in the project, in the company that I've picked up, which is a lot different to what you see today, where people just trying to build something to make a quick buck, right? So I think there's value in that, and what you've kind of said there with the guy talking about, you know, you've got the worst car in the parking lot, you're going to succeed, and the fact that, you know, from my perspective, only really knowing about ZeroTier potentially, you know, when I think about it, Simon was kind of going, oh, you should always use ZeroTier, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, right? So this is when but it was around a lot. It was around a lot more before then, right? So to your point, you're building and you're getting to this journey where eventually we're going to bring Andrew in and kind of weave that into the story as well. But finish your connection there.
I'm getting there. Yeah. So I'm getting there. So in 2019 to 2020, raised the first institutional seed money, which was from a couple of very good institutional funds. They're still with us. And it was more money, enabled me to grow the team and hire our first salesperson. I've got a funny story for that. I'm standing there in the co-working space with some of our early developers, that 2 of them are still with us, by the way. Actually, 3 of them are still with us. And we're talking about, I'm doing just founder-led sales at the time. And one of them makes a comment saying, you know, he thinks that I'm the most extroverted person in the company. And I said, that is horrifying. We need to hire a salesperson.
But not untypical of a bunch of nerds who are networking guys, right? I'm going to say it, right?
Yeah. It's so hired the first salesperson. Long story short, he basically got us. He presided over getting us from 0 to around $1 million ARR. And I'm time compressing a lot, but then COVID hit. COVID all of a sudden forced everyone to look at what those ahead of their time Brits called deperimeterization, because now nobody could come into the office. It also caused us, we had been talking about going fully remote to essentially eat our own dog food for a long time. It kind of made us do that too. So that's how I ended up back here in Ohio. And, you know, it's also where all of my family and the kids' grandparents and stuff are. And in a way, it's eating our own dog food because we use our own product more by doing that. But COVID hit, and it was this big growth in all of a sudden people realizing that the old castle and moat model is not keeping up anymore. It was also around that time that, so for the first probably 3 or 4 years of the company existing, there really were no true apples to apples competitors. It was kind of the first modern, I mean, I guess if you go way back, there was a product called Log Me In Hamachi that did something, that did something kind of similar, but it was much more restricted in what it could do. There was really nothing like this for a long time. And it's funny because that's a double-edged thing. On one hand, it makes you feel like you're smart. On the other hand, it makes you wonder if anyone actually cares about this. Because so around the time COVID hit is also when the first couple of competitors started to show up. And my attitude toward it was more like, finally. But they
that's got to be a validating moment. That's a validating moment, right? It
actually is validating, and it actually has been in a way a help, because the fact that they're out there too means that it's a lot easier for us now to explain to people what we do.
Yeah,
it's not, we're not selling Martian technology that is completely unprecedented, and that actually makes sales easier. But anyway, long story short, made it to a Series A during COVID. That was really difficult. Had a bit of help there from someone who was with us for a while. He's no longer with us, but he was with us for a while in a business operations point of view. That was a big help there. Got a Series A, and we're continuing to grow, and I'm wearing too many hats. And this is where I introduce Andrew. So I had always been pretty straightforward with with the investors in ZeroTier that, look, this started as a sole founder venture. The reason I did that is just that I didn't happen to have a co-founder at the time that that was looking to do this with me. And the very first angel investor, I said, do you want me to try to find a co-founder? He goes, no. If you don't have anybody right now, it's actually better for you to do it sole founder in the beginning, because I've seen too many companies die because of founder drama. Yeah. So I was like, okay, we'll do that. So anyway, I was wearing too many hats, and the thing that I love the most really is building. So I'd always been straight up with our investors that I'm open to the idea of basically hiring a CEO replacement if anybody comes along that has the right resume for this. And there is one on the phone call right now. He was introduced. Hello. He was introduced to me by, so he was a ZeroTier user before he was CEO of ZeroTier.
Beautiful.
He was introduced to me by one of our investors who has taken a very active role. I like this guy a lot. He's should I mention who it is? I guess it's public.
Sure. Brad Castle at Anorak.
Yeah, Anorak Ventures. But he introduced me to Andrew, and we hit it off pretty well. And so I basically hired him to replace me as CEO, focus on growth and fundraising and revenue and all that sort of stuff, and get me back to building. And I'm now building full-time again, and we are going to have some really cool stuff this summer and fall.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because of that. I'm not going to talk about it yet because it's
we're going to get to that part.
It's a secret, but it's going to be really cool. So just
let's hand over to Andrew.
Yeah,
Andrew,
let's let him introduce himself.
Yeah, because you've got an amazing background as well. That from the research that I saw your fingers have been in so many pies, and you've done some amazing things with some great companies, Oculus, Magic Pony, like what eventually is PlayStation Now. You got a number of patents, so you're pretty well credentialed here. So just a bit of a very quick background on yourself, tie it all up to what Adam talked about, and what you're trying to do now which to me, build on the promise of connecting the whole world. Simple, which is what ZeroTier is trying to do, right?
Yeah, so I'd love to hear what parts of my history really appeal to you, Adam, but I will get to that. So I started off, I grew up in Scotland.
Real quick, one of them is I can usually tell talking to somebody for about 10 minutes if they actually know what they're talking about or not. So you passed that one. That was a big one.
Fair point.
Anyway,
probably the most important one, right?
Yeah.
No, I grew up in Scotland. I never actually went to college. Left school when I was 15, taught myself to program. I did, in fact, program on a Commodore 64. Now you're making me think back all those years.
Can I say, I wanted to go back to it. I did as well. But I put in my first programming language in there. I got a magazine from a newsagent, typed it in, spent 4 days typing it in, hit go, and the thing didn't work. And I tell a story that was the end of my programming career because I was so frustrated with that. But I dabbled in that as well on the Commodore 64. I was more interested in playing Wizard of War and those sorts of things and Ninja Gaiden. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, the same here. I was mostly about getting the games going than typing in the games, right? So self-taught programmer, started building websites in Scotland. Just moved on. I always seek a challenge, I guess. I would always try and find something that seemed scary or maybe I couldn't do and go for it to, see where the world would take me. I ended up at the European Space Agency. That got me across to Europe. I was in the Netherlands for almost 10 years, I think. I was at the agency first as a programmer. Then that's what got me into telecoms and networking, VoIP traffic, connecting all the sites. From there, I went on to work at UPC Broadband, which is owned by Liberty Global, which I describe to most people, certainly Americans, as the Comcast of Europe. Okay. So I worked there in a lot of network operations. I was right outside the knock, actually, for my first year, literally, the desk on the way in, performance monitoring, went on a lot of provisioning projects. I think of myself as a network guy, right? I know networks very well. After some years there, what are we getting into, like 2007-ish, life felt a little bit like a Dilbert cartoon. I was the consultant at the giant corporation. You have you don't know office politics till you're in a meeting with 20 other people and you have a conversation and we all decide to do something which everyone knows is not the correct thing to do, but it just made sense. So I quit to start a company, or actually, it's a lie. I quit to take a couple months off and then find out if I wanted to get a job somewhere else. And during that period, I started programming again, which I hadn't done in a number of years. I'd been a project manager, and got sucked into what became Gaikai, a video game streaming startup. Started out as let's try and reduce the friction of streaming video games, and that led to the pivot. YouTube was Web 2.0 was big back then. Can we get video games to run online in the browser? Could we stream them? Long story short, that brought me to America. Couldn't raise money in Europe. We raised $45 million from Benchmark, NEA, Rustic Canyon, Intel, and sold that to Sony in 2012 for $380 million. And that's now the PS Now service. So if you are a gamer or you have a PlayStation, you are still using all the code I made back then. And again, it was ahead of its time, Adam. That was, we would go into an investor meeting and demo a video game streaming, and they'd watch the demo and then say, right, so you're like the equivalent of downloading a CD, right? And they just could not believe or get what they had literally just seen and experienced.
In 2012, that's out there in 2012. No one's thinking streaming, really. YouTube is 6 years old. Like Twitch doesn't exist. So
And I again learned live video. So to me, live video is, I think it was video game engine to the wire in 4 milliseconds, and then your ping time. And of course, nowadays, if you talk to any startup in live video, I think sub 2 minutes is considered live in the industry.
Wow.
So anyway, after that exit, kind of put my investor hat on, became an angel on the West Coast, invested into Oculus VR, Magic Pony, Flexport, Mux, 100 odd companies I'm involved with, and a GP at 7% Ventures in London. So very much the VC hat on, but always wanted to get operational again, always wanted to get back into it. I had been using ZeroTier myself, so 2018, 2019.
Wow.
When did we start talking about them? I guess late 23, started really getting much more concrete about wanting to get into something, and was introduced through our my friend and your investor, Greg Castle at Anorak, got talking, and I think we hit it off very well. I think what stood out to me about ZeroTier, well, first of all, Adam built it and people came. So as a VC, I grew to be very cynical, and perhaps why I decided I want to become operational, because you very quickly learn it's not about the product, it's about go-to-market. All that startup is really is about a go-to-market, and the product is just there to support the go-to-market. And especially engineering founders will build something, and they'll build a great product, and they'll keep engineering that product. And of course, no one shows up, right? Like the joke is you could show up and tell them you've invented a unicorn that, farts rainbows. And I wouldn't ask you to see the unicorn. I'd just ask you who might want to buy that and how to price it and what's the go-to-market about that. So that ZeroTier had already millions and millions of users, and there's such draw was amazing, really stood out to me. And again, that mission, it's one I share, right? When you go to the Windows control panel and look up networking, you still see IP addresses, you still see DHCP, you see acronyms, DHCP, NAT, the kind of acronym the user of an operating system should not see. And ZeroTier just solves that instantly. It's like a connective glue over the top. It's all I really care about is which other computers I want to be on a network with. What are identities? I'll just list them, I'll join. I don't care where in the world they are. I don't care if they're roaming. I don't care if they're on an airplane. I just want it to work. And ZeroTier's kind of magic. That's what it does, right? ZeroTier will hop between the physical networks to keep the connection alive. In fact, I think, Adam, the first time, so I'm in Portland, Oregon, the first time you flew out to Portland, you told me you got on, I think it was a United flight, opened up your laptop, connected to the airplane Wi-Fi, and ZeroTier found its way out, and you were on the network, even though you hadn't paid for the Wi-Fi on the plane. ZeroTier just got out.
Whoa, hold on. Don't. I feel like that's something we probably shouldn't give away.
Does
that still work?
it apparently still works on some airlines.
That's awesome.
You're
completely bypassing.
It'll find a way out and work. Probably because it looks like DNS traffic. But
that's so amazing. Hey, quick sidebar, quick post. I found at the time we were running low on time. So what I've actually done, I've gone and extended my Zoom trial. So we've got unlimited time now because I feel like this conversation was going really well, but I didn't want to rush it down to 7 minutes. So we're actually really good on this call now to keep on going. So time pressures are semi-off.
Great.
Let's
Good
go. So we'll start with keep it going with that plane thing.
Yeah. So Adam told me when he landed that he'd got on the plane Wi-Fi and hadn't paid for it, and it just summed up the magic of ZeroTier.
That's amazing.
Right?
It's just that story.
Reliable, robust connectivity that you don't really need to care about. And I think as I've spoken to now to customers, especially at conferences, people come up and they gush, and their network engineers in particular seem to get religious about ZeroTier because they use it. It just works. They take it with them for the rest of their career. I think it just makes it so much easier for them. Like there's so many layers of complexity in network engineering. And ZeroTier just flattens it away. And we're back in the 90s with a switch in your desk at a LAN party. Is the Ethernet cable plugged in? Yes. Okay, it works, right?
That's awesome.
I don't really have to think about anything else. It's magic. And then, of course, one of the huge side effects from that, security, right? All your ports, services, everything's protected. And I think a lot of what business sees in ZeroTier is that security angle, right? It's very easy. It's much easier to write a business case around security than it is around your network engineers gaining back some brain space because they don't have to keep so many logical hoops in their mind. But which one is the actual key benefit? But
can I add there? I think that sometimes you give up, the good things in life, like the simplicity and convenience, but then you've got to give up something. And typically in this world, security is one of those things, right? So, if you want to make the network less complex, simple, typically you're giving away security. Is generally the way this works, right? Or the other way around. Either it's too secure and it's too locked down, and you're giving away, that efficiency, right? So if something like ZeroTier can solve that, which clearly it does, you're winning as well. And that's where not only I think it appeals to the hardcore networking religious type, which is, again, I'm going to bring Simon to. He was that hardcore network religious type, but it also appeals to people like myself who aren't fundamentally network guys, but want to get something working really simply without giving away the security. So I think what you've articulated there is perfect in terms of both sides of the use cases. There's a spectrum here where it works.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a bit of a cliche, but I genuinely believe if everyone in the world if networking was ZeroTier or something very like it, the world would be a better place, right? It wouldn't just be easier, but it would be far, far, far more secure for everybody, whether you're a network engineer or just an average user on your iPhone or on your Windows desktop. Yeah. So.
All right. So let's talk about the use cases specifically. I guess what I'll do is I'll start it off with my particular use case that I had, and we'll work up from there, right? So for me, like I said, being able to connect from my lab sites, my home network, to a lab in Ohio, actually Columbus, Ohio. That's where our head office is, or one of our HQs for Veeam Software is there. So I had a lab there. Then I've got a lab in Prague. And then I also had on ZetaGrid this VMware Cloud Director set up where it was inside VCD, VMware's cloud stack. And I had Melbourne, Sydney, and Perth. So these are my connectivity points, right? So I've got workloads in each one, and I want to make everyone talk together. Prior to that, there was a whole bunch of firewalling, NAT rules. There was leveraging OpenVPN traffic and all this kind of stuff, right? And it was a mismatch of different technologies to use. Then I remember one of them broke. So fundamentally, the whole thing fell apart, okay? And then finally, after the pressure of years of, you got to check out ZeroTier, I installed it. I've got to say the simplicity of the install is something that's very highly tickable as well, in terms of it's almost like, well, what do I do? Well, you just kind of install it here. You've got the agent, you download it. You've got the website, which is very, very easy, not over the top, not overly complex. It just kind of gives you exactly what you've got to do. It's very simple. So within half an hour, to cut this story down short, I had all of these sites connected and working, right? And then I looked at the security, and then I looked at the ports, and I saw how you actually control, access between each one, and the implicit zero trust element of it that was put in place to start with, and then how you slowly kind of work that back to your own sort of devices, right? And within half an hour, I was connected and working. And I was doing backups from Sydney to Perth, and I was pulling files from Prague to Ohio with ease, right? And it was just working. So that was my particular use case from a lab perspective. And Adam, I've got to think that early days, home labs and labbing and dev environments were a huge part of your growth.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the phases. I mean, we still have people that use it for that, of course, as well as a lot of gamers and stuff like that. But we've, as we've grown, we've gotten into industrial applications and data centers and drones and satellites and aerospace and oil wells and all kinds of interesting things.
Yeah, I think it's a luxury problem, but one of the problems that's hard from a business point of view with ZeroTier is it can be used in almost anything in any use case. And of course, the classic startup advice is, pick a niche, dominate that small niche, and then grow. And it's like, well, this can go everywhere. So, where do we do it? So I can't remember, I'd have to look in a report, but I think ZeroTier, if I just look at our analytics platform, it's 230 countries and territories. There's literally not a territory on the planet, including Antarctica and satellites, where there isn't someone using ZeroTier right now as we're talking. And when I think of the use cases, so there's the remote dev team use case, there's connecting satellite ops use case, IoT, again, you've got that little knob on the wall calling back, about your HVAC system. There's many millions of devices like that, which make easier. The factory line, I think the average factory line has 200 internet connected devices on it from 19 different vendors. And you want all of them to be remotely accessible. You want all of them to be, on the same network, secure, reachable for the service rep who might be in a different continent. Then through to several dual use cases, like drones is a good one, right? There's no more adversarial network environment than being on a drone in a military zone because someone is actively trying to take down your network. And most people don't
literally,
most people don't know this with ZeroTier, but it supports multi-pathing and multi-homing. So if your Starlink goes down, ZeroTier will fall over to your 5G LTE, and if your 5G LTE modem goes down, it will fall over to your long-range Wi-Fi and back, and it will do that fall over in milliseconds. So you can stream video from your teleoperated drone, say, and it just hops between these physical layers. It really is very hard to kill. It's very resilient, right? It's a bit like that plane story. It's why, and maybe Adam can talk about this, the unofficial mascot is the tardigrade. And so whenever we go to a conference,
I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the icon.
I think it's pretty official at this point because we've given away stuffed tardigrades at DEF CON for a couple of years, so it's pretty official.
And people love them. I will say again, it's interesting being at a conference of ZeroTier because obviously people come past and you're used to selling your company at a conference. Over half the people that show up are like, "Oh, we use ZeroTier," and then spend 10 minutes pitching to me how amazing it is, their use case. And then they're incredibly excited to get to walk away with a tardigrade.
Yeah. And you know what? I've experienced that, and it's not in the ZeroTier world, but in the backup world with Veeam, when Veeam was rising up, the razors, same sort of thing. Like you'd be at a conference, and most of the people will come and say, "Hey, we love your product. We're using it. We think it's great." Yeah. And then you give them a free gift, and they love it, right? Because they're fans. And what it sounds like is you guys have developed quite a strong fan base, so to speak, of the product and the company as well. And that's what you get when you go to those shows. So completely understand what you're talking about there.
Yeah. And it's part of the benefit of the open source strategy, right? You get an enormously long tail of millions and millions of users. It still shocks me how often I speak to someone and start describing ZeroTier and they go, "Oh yeah, we use that," right? It's not uncommon. It's at least, 20-30% of every call or conversation I have around ZeroTier with someone who may be a customer or is in tech, that is the reaction I'll get. I think last summer I stayed in an Airbnb in London, and for whatever reason I needed to restart the router or log into the router, and I saw the open ports that someone previously who stared at the Airbnb had opened up on the router. right? It's, we really are out there. It's becoming more of a fabric of the internet, I think, which is great, right?
Yeah, the fabric's a good way to describe it. And I guess to put it, so the use cases are there: IoT, embedded systems, remote work, edge computing, industrial automation, drones, which I find really amazing. And even though drones have recently gotten a bad name in terms of their use cases, but let's think of drones in the best possible way that we can. But yeah, so direct competitors and alternatives, that exist. I think I mentioned a couple. OpenVPN, WireGuard are the ones that I've personally used. LogMe and Hamachi. But yeah, I think to your point, it's more sort of accepted today that we need these sort of platforms to be able to more easily connect the world and create that fabric. So, where does ZeroTier excel today over the competition?
I can talk about a few things there if you want. One of them, so there's a few areas. One is it's very, very lightweight. The agent is very tiny. It uses very little memory, so it'll run on very small devices. It's very fast, and it emulates a layer 2, or it can emulate a layer 2 Ethernet network, which means it'll carry any kind of traffic that you want. When it was first released, some of the stories I got was people playing old DOS games that speak IPX over ZeroTier.
Wow.
And we have
that's cool.
Yeah. We have users in the field that are using it to send a protocol that I've never personally had contact with, called CAN bus over Ethernet to the cloud, which is so you can do stuff like that with it. It also has those are deep technical things, but also in terms of its focus, it is more device centric. Some of our competitors are focusing more on basically human identity based networking, which is great for a VPN sort of use case. This is designed to be, or it's built around the idea that it's more for connecting devices. Not to say you can't use it as a person with a VPN, but it doesn't require that every device be tied to essentially an OIDC account or something like that. It allows you to provision devices independently. It also supports some features like joining more than one network at once, which a lot of the competitors we have don't. And then last but not least, we when I originally founded this, I didn't even conceptualize it originally as a SaaS product.
Okay.
And we have a SaaS product. It's a chunk of our revenue. But I'm always thinking about how to make it, and you can do this with the current product, and we actually want to make this maybe more possible in the future in certain ways, to be able to run it yourself and run it in an air-gapped environment or a private environment or a mobile environment that is not always connected to the internet or with transient connectivity. And it will function just fine. And it can be, and a lot of things you can self-host them as a disconnected network, but what we have is something that you can self-host and it still interoperates with everything else, which is kind of unique.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I also spend a long time thinking about the business aspects of that. One of the reasons SaaS is so popular is it presents a very, very easy business model. So I think also a lot, and this is getting into future stuff I'm not going to talk about here, but what else might be possible there. So so I'll hand it back to Andrew, but I wanted to jump in and talk about a little bit of it's nerd candy. There's a lot of nerd stuff.
Love the nerd candy. It's okay. I love this talk. It's great.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, I think you hit it on the head, but I would lean into device centric. I mean, everyone else tries to sell you a seat, right? Which implies it's for a human. And I think right now I remember the list said there's depending on which analyst you believe, there's 18 billion devices online. And, and it's frequently said as a certain number of devices per person, meaning per human. Yeah. But the same analyst will tell you that in 10 years, there'll be 125 billion devices online. And the number of humans ain't growing that fast. but the robots are coming, right? The drones are coming, and not just the flying drones, but every car in 10 years will be an internet connected device, right? It's not necessarily behind a human. It might be carrying a human, it might be carrying your kids, right?
Yeah.
Its requirement for connectivity is almost more important, and that is robust and reliable. Its criticality of that connectivity is orders of magnitude more than anything I have in my life that needs internet connectivity right now. And the number of devices that are going to fit into that category is going to explode, right, into tens of billions.
Yeah,
so I think
you're talking 18 billion to 128 billion. That's a fair multiplier, right? So, but you can see it happening. And I remember on the radio last week we were talking about car telemetry and how effectively every car today that's net new does have some sort of telemetry data in it. It's just not exposed to the human or to the driver or to anyone really. But what they've talked about is that there's going to be some law passed in certain areas of the world where people are going to tap, or the companies or insurance companies will tap into that IoT data, telemetry data, to see if you're a good driver or not. And the whole surprise was it's already there, it's already happening. You guys just don't know about it yet. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't know how the truth of that is, and people were a bit shocked at that. But when you think about it, why wouldn't car manufacturers be inserting telemetry data right now? And they are, because it's all circuitry, right? So yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. Is that the need for the edge devices, what we call Internet of Things. I think that term I've often
this is the type of Internet of Things, right? For sure.
Yeah,
it's
Internet of Things. Yeah, and it's getting smarter. The challenge I had with Internet of Things back in the day was that it dumbed down the internet, I thought, at the end of the day. But actually where it's become now is that the edge is where smart things happen. Whereas 10 years ago, the edge wasn't doing very smart things. So I think that's the big differentiation and why I'm comfortable with Internet of Things today.
I think Internet of Things implies that wart in my wall monitoring the temperature, right? Something that costs a few bucks, the internet went down, who cares? But 10 years from now, it might be $100,000 car with your children in it, right? And it's still Internet of Things. It's still that use case, but it's just so much more critical. And I think that's the world is coming to ZeroTier, right? I think that Adam said he was well ahead. We might still be 5 years ahead, right? But the world is getting there, right? We just have to keep building for it.
I just had a thought about it as well. Like, maybe in 10, 15 years, maybe even shorter, an Internet of Thing device might be inside one of us, right?
For sure.
And just imagine if ZeroTier is working inside of you. I think that's really an interesting kind of concept,
I could see medical stuff, definitely. If you have like a life-threatening condition or something where, oh my gosh, your cardiac pacemaker fails and it notifies someone or something like that,
Yeah, the use cases
there, definitely see stuff like that.
Yeah, they're not too in the future, right? I think they're definitely more likely to happen than not. And to think that your product and Adam, what you started, could be inside people, I think is kind of mind blowing in itself. But we're getting into the futures now. I love that. Let's drag it back a little bit before we finish off, just to explain. How is Andrew coming on board? How have we evolved, and how are we growing ZeroTier over the next 6 to 12 to 24 months?
So I think a lot of what my job coming on board and kind of really digging into the company is see who our ICP is, right? Who's the ideal customer? Who should we be trying to sell to? So, and there's not a diss on Adam and the original team, but it was an open source project. And it was very much a project where the people came, and it grew to a project at massive scale. But I think it lacked some of the, I call them packaging, right? Yeah, Adam hears me say this all the time. The packaging around the product, the core product works. I've been here well over a year. We've yet to see a single bug in the core product. I mean, it's stable, it's reliable, it's there.
Amazing.
You can always add some bells and whistles, right? But it's there. But things like, in fact, we just announced the relational-based access control, updating our UI and UX to make it easier to use. On our roadmap, zero touch provisioning, single tenant, instant managed single tenants for an enterprise customer that might want to self-host. At least they don't want SaaS, but at the same time they don't want to run it themselves. Getting into some of the cloud provider marketplaces, so it's easier for the enterprise to purchase and to use. These are all they're non-core, they're non-sexy, but from a business point of view, they're very important because it enables people to purchase, right? It's like ticking off the reasons for someone to say no, right?
It's growth mechanisms.
You're a hobbyist. Yeah. You can use ZeroTier very easily. You can just decide, I want to use it and use it. But any big company has a giant compliance department, and they have the matrix of tick boxes that they have to tick off before they can use it. So I think a lot of how I've steered the company since coming on board is kind of reinforcing to everyone how important these things are, even if they're not really network engineering. In fact, again, Adam, like I frequently say, there's the 80-20 rule. The ZeroTier has the 80%, and then there's the 20% of packaging. And of course, it turns out that that's the second 80%, because it turns out there's so much work and so much build space over there. So we've invested heavily in that area. And it's spinning up a partner program as well. Making it easier to sell to a broader swathe, getting rid of reasons to say no. But yeah, the core product, it's no one has any complaints.
That's amazing in itself, right? Yeah. I think that speaks to growth. That speaks to, moving from, hobbyist to SMB to SME commercial into the enterprise space where, let's be honest, most companies want to grow up to that, right? And work their way into that. And I think touching back on my previous point, I think some companies lose themselves when they start to look at that. But what I'm getting from Andrew's background and then Adam's passion for what, the company and the program and what he's trying to achieve, I don't see that happening here because you're so strongly foundational in that, problem statement that getting into the enterprise officially is just like the icing on the cake, right? So I think that's pretty much the way that I see it. And interestingly enough, early on we said, I think the biggest problem with ZeroTier, or someone said it, is that people struggle to understand what you guys do, right? So if you were to, I'll ask you both just to finish off. I'll start with Andrew first. So, if people was to ask you, what does ZeroTier do? What would be your sort of pitch?
Well, usually the very first question I ask back is, how technical are you? to try and get a read on them. Assuming a moderate technicality, I like
you play the moderate technical person. You play the moderate, and I'll hit Adam for the technical.
I go with the old school. It's a switch on your desk. It's like a giant old school Ethernet switch in the sky with infinitely long Ethernet cables, and it's connectivity, networking that just magically works. And it's easy to reason about. It's easy to plug in. I mentioned earlier, the Windows network dialog shows you IP addresses and things. Why does it do that? Well, back in the 90s, when it did that, that was okay. The average user of Windows can reason about a simple IP address, a flat network, and ZeroTier brings that back.
I love that. All right, Adam, same question.
I'll give actually two ends of it. For people that are very non-technical, I sometimes describe it as being kind of like a chat room for machines. So it's kind of like making a channel on Slack or Discord and adding a bunch of things to it, except it's not people you're adding, it's devices.
Love that.
And when they're in that channel, they can all talk to each other no matter where they are. They don't need to care where they are, and it just works. On the very technical end, I would go back kind of to the beginning, and I would say, we want to make it possible to do networking as if the whole planet is one data center, and we abstract away the complexity of the physical network, and also offer that in a way that is secure, private, and there's another buzzword lately that's become popular is data sovereignty, which is a type of privacy and security. Being able to offer people control of their network in a way that is easy and flexible and works across different network boundaries. So, I mean, I can get real technical, but that would take a while.
That's fair. No, we've got the levels there. Hey, Adam, Andrew, this has been a really great discussion. We could have talked for a lot longer on this. The back and forth was amazing. The reason for ZeroTier being, I think everyone kind of understands it now. I think that's a great part of this. We've gone through this. We've also really gone through the need for Andrew to come on board, and the mission that's now being turned into this next frontier with the scaling, hitting the enterprise, making it more known more than it is, and that enthusiast sort of the natural growth that Adam built at the start. It's a great story. It's a great product. I really thank you guys for being on episode 100 of Great Things with Great Tech, and looking forward to seeing what ZeroTier does in the future. Thanks for being on.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, just as a reminder, thanks for listening to this episode. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to highlight companies and technologies shaping our world. Don't forget to follow us on social media at GTwGT Podcast, and visit GTwGT.com for more great content and all past episodes. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. Please spread the word, and if you feel like it, drop a review. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.